All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is 2000 on a Sunday night. I almost said Friday. I'm still not used to it. Been half a year now. Anyway, 2000 on a Sunday night. Kate in the studio again. Cameron's online with us. Hi. And tonight we're going to talk about the news. Because what's the most important thing that's happening in the world today? Apparently, it's that Donald Trump tweeted mean stuff about Mika Brzezinski.
And CNN.
That's apparently the only thing anybody wants to talk about is Donald Trump's mean tweets. I want to point something out, and then we're not going to talk about that shit. But before anybody else gets to say anything else about Mika Brzezinski and her being abused by poor Donald Trump, let's not forget, this is the same woman who live on the air said the words, "I'm afraid that Donald Trump is going to take control of the media and tell people what to think." And that's our job. So you know what? I could give a shit what Donald Trump has to say to that woman. So what's going on in the world today? Socialized medicine. Barrio promised us that we'd see $2,500 a year reduction in our premiums, that we'd see the cost of health care go down, that we'd keep our doctors. And not only did that turn out to be not true, but we have pretty compelling evidence from Gruber that was known to not be true. That when Barrio made those promises, they were already operating under the assumption that those things were not true, that the objective was to get to single payer. So tonight we're going to talk about single payer. And why? Is it because the Republicans are taking a shit on the opportunity to use their nearly uncontested control of the government to fix this debacle? No. There are some good things coming out of that plan. But there is a baby. There is a little baby boy whose name is Charlie Gard, who was born with a rare mental disease, rare brain disorder. It's a rare form of infant hydrocephaly, and he's not doing good. He's in trouble. So the Brits, because they have a single payer socialized medical system that in no way offers free market incentive for doctors to become adequate, not proficient. They're not under incentivized to achieve proficiency, but adequacy. You British doctors are a damn joke. This child is sick. This child is dying. And the hospital's recourse is to petition the government to order the child's death, which they intend to achieve by subjecting this poor baby to his own private Holodomor, orchestrated famine. The court order is so explicit that it specifically forbids the child from being released to his parents, forbids the hospital from releasing the child to his parents on the fear that the parents will feed the child. Now, we are talking about parents, a mother and a father who love their baby boy, who did not, although it's the woman's choice, this woman did not choose to murder her baby in utero, but rather to have a baby. To do what people do, what humans do, to have a child. And the child is in trouble. The child is suffering. The child is sick. And now that mommy has decided not to murder her child, the government has decided that the child is not likely to be a sufficiently productive member of their socialist order, and so it must be murdered by food deprivation.
Now, can I just point out real quick? This is a 10-month-old child. He'll probably die of dehydration long before he dies of starvation.
Okay, that's fair.
Are either dignified, because dignified, the whole dignity aspect is what they keep coming up with. That's the rhetoric that they're using.
No, it's funny. That's not just rhetoric, Cade. I read up a lot on this to the point to where I actually got very emotional about it. I read these parents' Instagram posts, and I read the hospital's official word on it, and the High Court of the EU's official word on it, and they specifically use that word, dignity. They say that Charlie should be allowed to die with dignity. So, can I just ask a really politically incorrect question? What in the hell is dignified about starving a retarded person to death? And excuse me for saying it that way if my words are offensive, but I think the concept is offensive. This is a human being, and a court has decided, nah, we're not even going to try because it's more dignified to kill it.
Now, I find it interesting that you say it's a human being. The reason we're allowed to abort babies in America and most civilized countries, as we like to think of ourselves, the reason that we're still allowed to murder our progeny in utero is because the progressive mind does not accept that children are people. They don't have rights. That's Hillary Clinton's position. She stated very clearly, babies in utero, infants, fetuses do not have rights because they're not people. And I know, it sounds suspiciously like when the Democrats were arguing against abolition, blacks don't have rights because they're not people.
Yeah, they just don't count as much.
Right. Because they're not human, you may dispose of them as property. And, well, we beat them on that. We stood up, we raised arms, and we said, no, these men are human men, and they will be treated like human men, and they will not be disposed of like so much property. And today, we're making the same argument for our infants. We are arguing that our children are human, and they are not property to be disposed of for political convenience.
Well, I'd like to, I realize it's just a technical point, but it's one that really bears pointing out. We, in our Western civilized countries, we're not allowed to abort our babies. If my wife's pregnant and I beat her up until she loses the baby, now suddenly that's a crime. What if I didn't want to have that child? What if it just wasn't convenient for my life and I was in the wrong place in my life and everything else? But no, and it's offensive to even ask that question now. You're not even allowed to point out, well, it's a women's thing. It's a women's issue. Men can't have babies. You know what? That's exactly right. And men can't have babies.
Therefore, men cannot weigh in on it.
Oh,
you know,
I'm just saying.
We have a transgender woman, female to male, who is pregnant now, and there's this whole to-do on the internet about the first pregnant man.
There's not been a pregnant man yet.
That was a couple of years ago. There was the same thing, and it was on the front cover of, I want to say, People magazine.
You know why they keep saying it's the first? And because it's not actually the first. It's why they keep rerunning the story, because people like me are like, no, as soon as you get an actual dude pregnant, okay. All right,
yeah,
we're talking about people,
the front page.
We're talking about people who are having hormone therapy to increase testosterone, decrease estrogen, but still have the reproductive systems of a female. Therefore, you are still a female. It's not rocket science.
Correct.
Yeah, and look, from the civil libertarian side of it, if that's what you want to do with your life, I actually don't think I should be allowed to stand in your way. I shouldn't help you pay for it either. Like that's
Agreed. Right.
But you know, these same people, these same leftists that would that wasn't it California a few years ago that said that prisoners that wanted to transition, like the state had to pick up the tab. Like, you're a prisoner, okay? If transitioning should be the last thing on your mind.
You identify as a prisoner now.
No.
That's all you are.
Now,
But
I don't want to get off into that crap though.
I was actually trying to pull it back. That's why I was
Okay, good.
that's why I was comparing it to the leftist stuff, because these same leftists that want for things like transgender reassignment to be covered under your mandatory insurance plan are the same people that ultimately want single payer. A lot of people on the left, hardcore committed leftists, took Obamacare as a compromise, because that's not what they want. They believe that healthcare is a fundamental right and that the government should help you get access to healthcare. And they just don't understand that what they're giving away, that part of what is just making me crazy and why I'm so frustrated with the Republicans and the whole repeal and replace. I think as long as the conversation is repeal and replace, we've already lost the argument. Like, it should just be repeal. Like, things were not this bad. And the people that are like, oh, thousands of people a day will die. No, they won't, because in our country, it's illegal to not give somebody life-saving care. In our country, baby Charlie doesn't get flipping starved to death or dehydrated to death, whatever the accent, the active verb for that is, whatever. But the
Right.
point is
Your point is that in the United States of America, the murder of Charlie Gard through intentional negligence is a crime.
yes. In fact, in the United States of America, somebody like Charlie, we go out of our way to take care of. It's ironic that so many on the left go off on their communist models about, you know, to each his ability he giveth and to each his ability he receiveth. Well, what's funny is our indigent care in this country is amazing because we don't starve you to death when we're done with you. This really, really, really upsets me. Single payer is evil because you give up your freedom of choice, and it is not unlimited health care. It's actually extremely limited health care. It's just, you never find out about those limitations until after they're like, nah, you're 70. There's no point in doing the hip surgery on you because, you know, that'll cost like $50,000 and I'm not going to pay for that. What? You're 70. Not a baby killer.
I'm glad you mentioned choice. Let's we can have a bit of a conversation about euthanasia. This is not euthanasia. This is murder. And here's the distinction. Charlie, although a living human, does not have the capacity to communicate his wishes. His parents, his guardians, do. And they have communicated that their wishes do not include his murder. If we were talking about the elder infirm, someone who still had his faculties, is suffering needlessly, and would prefer to choose to end his suffering, even with the help of a doctor, that is a very different conversation. And honestly, I come down on the side of euthanasia because, quite frankly, when you talk about the choice that another person wants to make, it is it's a very slippery slope to start arguing against the agency of that person to make choices. That is, of course, a very difficult conversation to balance when you start talking about younger people and suicide. But
absolutely right, Don.
Yeah, Don. I'm going to get to that. And no, you know what? We just covered that. You're simply agreeing with us, and you're right to agree with us because.
So I mean, let's back up a step. You're talking about choice and how Charlie is basically being denied his choice.
I didn't send you the chat link yet. Sorry.
Oh, thanks. But Charlie's being denied his choice through his parents, who are acting as his agents. And let's be really clear here. To date, they've raised almost $1.8 million. And what they want to do,
their government to pay for this.
Yeah, what they want to do is they want to take private money that was charitably given to them. And this baby is in bad shape. Just flying him to this country might kill him. And then once he gets here, about the best they can hope for is that they can stop his disease from getting worse. There's no way they think they can reverse the brain damage that's already been done to him. So it is a long shot. However, the parents want to do it. And maybe I'm a little blind because I'm a parent of 4 children, and you just go ahead and tell me which one of them doesn't get medical care. Watch how many things I light on fire. But the court has decided, instead of this baby being released to them, because they know that's what's going to happen as soon as these parents get the baby, they're going to book the plane ticket. They're going to call the American doctors that are already here, waiting, screaming for the opportunity to try and save this child's life. And even if this situation goes bad and the kid dies anyway, and this treatment is a miserable failure, his life still has value for the collective, most ironically. And this isn't something that gets talked about a lot, but my wife did have an older sister who was born with a rare heart defect, and almost nothing was known about it at the time. And something went wrong with the shunt in her heart, and she died at about 2.5 years old. As luck would have it, there was another child here in Rockmart that was born with the exact same heart defect. And because of the lessons that the doctors had learned, frankly, making the uneducated mistakes they made on Elizabeth, this boy lived to 17 years old and graduated high school. And that would not have happened had what happened to my wife's older sister not already happened. And so even if you want to take the left's position and argue for collective rights, the medical value that this child has is incalculable. And it's just offensive. I'm sorry. I'm not going to go sputtering and yelling again, but it's no matter how you break this situation down and you cut it up, this kid doesn't have to die. At least not right now. They took his feeding tube out this weekend, so he probably doesn't have much longer. So
not without a fight.
You know, now, and it's funny that you mentioned that, Cade. Chris, go ahead. But there's do you want me to just...
I know what you're about to say. Go ahead and say it so I can follow on to it. And then I've got something else I want to cover.
I'll tell you another reason why that wouldn't happen in this country, and it's not something that a lot of people would think of, but it's the Second Amendment. The government cannot tell this citizenry, nah, never mind, you're just going to die for no reason other than we decree it. And it is the Second Amendment. Like, go ahead, threaten the life of one of my children. I'm not Rambo, but I promise I'll empty all my bullets into you, and it will be over for you. Might be over for me too, but I promise it will also be over for you. And because of that, it's not just our moral sensibilities where we really try and take care of those that are less fortunate than us in this country. And it's not even our legal system is set up to protect the weakest among us at the expense of almost everything else. But it is also that if either one of those things were challenged by a hostile agent, the response that we could give, what is it, Chris? The military says the amount of pressure you could apply is, it could just never happen here. And I say all that to say, if England was armed, and we talked about this with the knife attack. Oh, everybody run! He's got a knife! He's got a knife! It's not just that they had been disarmed of their weapons.
They've been emasculated.
Yeah, they've been psychologically disarmed.
Yes.
Fighting back is so low on their response scale that it really is a foreign concept to so many of them. Whereas the first thing most of us would do is fight back. So this whole situation is just,
if you come at me as I am unarmed and you come at me with a knife, I have already accepted that I am going to get cut. It is not your knife, it is the knife. Soon it will be my knife and you will die. When I hear about a crowd of men running from a man with a knife, my first question is, where are your men? If you come at me in my country, I am armed, I am prepared. And if you tell me that your intent is to murder my child by starving him to death, I will burn your cities to the ground to prevent that from happening. I have seen me do it.
I mean, seriously, 10,000 of yours for every one of mine.
Yes, cities to the ground. Now, I'm glad you mentioned earlier that there's the question of whether or not the baby could even survive transport. And that's something else about this whole situation. I'm sorry, Cade, about your church friends. But that's something else about this whole situation and what it means to have the kind of government that implements a single-payer system that's so fucked up. I try not to drop the F-bombs on here, but we're talking about murdering a child, and it just doesn't sit with me.
Slowly and painfully murdering a child.
The child is not likely to survive transportation. It would be immeasurably valuable to medical technology and the saving of lives in the future to at least try to save this baby's life. And it's likely that he won't survive transportation to the nation, which, because of its private enterprise for decades, has the technology to at least make the attempt. The question arises, why, if the child is likely not to survive the trip, do we not transport the doctors to the child? And the answer is that the socialized medicine system, the laws of the nation that decide to steal your money at gunpoint to provide things to people who do not earn, will not allow you entry into their country to perform life-saving medicine.
Well, it's the way socialized medicine works. They have to tell you who you can and can't see, or they can't balance the math. Their bean counters and central planners can't balance out all their equations. And people like Charlie are the things that you fudge around the edges to make it work.
Again, they're not asking anything of their government, their healthcare system. They're not asking any taxes from their citizens.
It's just like anything else you give. I have always believed that any power you give the government, you might as well go ahead and assume the government has 100% authority over that power. Because if they want to, it eventually comes down to they can kill you if they want to exercise that power and you tell them no. Even things like, and I realize it's a very extreme example, but get a ticket for not wearing a seatbelt and then refuse to show up to court and then refuse to come to the door when the sheriff comes knocking and then refuse to come outside when they kick your door in and see what happens to you.
And I don't want to get off of this subject at all because we haven't covered the papacy's response. But Chris and I were watching a Louder with Crowder before we started broadcasting, and they were talking about the California law that as of yesterday, correct, as of July 1st was the deadline to turn in weapons with magazines over a certain amount, and so it'll be interesting to see how that, to your point, Cameron, plays out as to how are they going to enforce that, what kind of liberties are going to be stepped on, and what kind of violence may or may not ensue as a result. But a lot of our police forces and our county's sheriff's department and everything are against that anyway, so it may not be enforced. But talk about the papacy's response, because this is
so early in the week, after Charlie's parents lost the legal battle to try and get Charlie so they could take him to America and get him some treatment.
Just give him a drink of. Oh, I'm trying not to drop F-bombs either. Just give the baby some water. I mean, damn it, people.
Yeah, please.
If you're watching, if you've got a thing against swear words on here, by the way, I don't have any church friends watching. It's just mom that's watching, and she knows you. She's good. There's a certain level of passion that goes with something that's just going to elicit some serious swear words, and this is one of those things. I'm the only one here that doesn't have children, but this still, it's just emotionally, it's gut-wrenching.
Well, see,
and it calls upon harsh language to deal with something that's just, it's unbelievable. It's impossible to process that this is happening in 2017.
When I got out of the Army and stopped going to shithole countries and hunting down men who murder babies to make political points, I kind of hoped I was done dealing with men who murder babies to make political points. But apparently, even here where we build homes without the use of our own feces, that's just not the atmosphere. It's not the political atmosphere.
I mean, I guess guys with crazy hair wearing robes are not to be trusted.
But in the last, just in the last couple of hours, it looks like, just earlier today, Pope Francis has actually demanded that the parents be allowed to do everything possible to treat their 10-month-old son, amending the Vatican's previous position after conservatives complained. I'm looking at a story from the AP right now, 2 hours 28 minutes ago.
Well, that's interesting, because I read something from the papacy this morning where they were very indifferent. The language was not, oh, we're happy that this baby is going to die, but it was not the full-throated endorsement of saving this child's life that you would have expected. What wasn't there was just as telling it as what was there. It's kind of refreshing to know that the Pope has stepped up and said, look, I'm the Pope, and saved the baby's life.
If it was the pre-Tudor era, before Henry VIII said, wait a minute, I have a bigger fist than the Pope, what the Pope said would have made a huge difference. What the king said would have made a huge difference, and this thing would have been stopped in its tracks. But now, Great Britain is completely different, and I haven't even heard the Crown's position on this. It doesn't even matter anyway. But do we even know how the Crown feels about this?
I would imagine that this is the kind of thing that the Crown tries to stay out of, unless it's boxed in.
You're probably right. Yeah. Chris is Googling right now.
Queen
on tour is what came up because Freddie Mercury, who's been dead since the 80s, is more important to pop culture.
I mean,
Queen of England.
Fat Bottom Girls is an amazing song.
They make the rocking world go round, Cameron.
They just need to get on their bikes and ride.
Yeah, I don't see any. I don't see any mention of the Crown's position on it.
No, they just wave at people.
Yeah.
Yeah, raise money for kids dying of AIDS in Africa and stuff like that. That's basically.
But not kids dying of their own doctor's court-enforced negligence.
I mean, this is why you don't give the government control over any part of your health care. As soon as they have control over part of it, they have control over all of it. And this is why. I mean,
But
like,
they have it from cradle to grave, and they have the authority to move that slider and shorten that time as they see fit.
yes, yes, and they'll even write long legal opinions that describe in great detail that, in their opinion, continuing to keep Charlie alive is going to put him through unnecessary suffering. That it's undignified to keep a person in this condition alive for any reason.
And again, the big thing is that they're stepping in to interfere with the opportunity that the child has, that the child's parents have, to try to save the child's life. They are stepping in. The court and the healthcare system are stepping in to prevent it. It's not that they're just saying we're not going to treat the child. The parents are not seeking. I know we've covered this, but it can't be stressed enough.
No, the court just hasn't stepped out of the way.
Right. They won't let the so that they can leave the country, take the child to America.
Yeah, the baby's not even allowed to die at home with its family.
It's unfathomable. I mean, I can't. I just can't process it.
Yeah. Yeah, your point about trying not to drop F-bombs, and there are some things that are just going to get such a passionate response. And look, let me just point out that if the parents were the ones that came forward and said, we believe that our child is suffering and it kills us to make this decision, but we think taking him off life support is the thing to do, I would still find it pretty horrifying that you're going to starve a baby to death. I would, and I don't know that I would personally agree with it, but at least in that situation, it would be the people that are going to put Charlie's interests first, because it's not the government's job to put Charlie's interests first, and it's not anybody plugged into that socialized medicine to put Charlie's interest first. It's their job to put the system's interest first, and it's the inverse of what we have here. Like you cannot
is unaffected by this. Am I wrong? Did Cameron just freeze?
Cameron, are you frozen? I think our Cameron is broken.
Huh.
We've broken our Cameron. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize. We'll just have to reboot him.
He takes the same battery as Hillary, so it shouldn't take long.
Okay, so the Cameron broke. Let me see if I can get him back on here. I just completely lost my train of thought because of the Cameron, the broken Cameron situation.
Well, we were getting redundant on this anyway because we're emotionally involved in it, and we need to move on anyway to other stories of the week.
Well, honestly, there's not a whole lot of other stories of the week, but Don in the audience here just asked about what my thoughts are on Trump's retweet of the WWE Trump beatdown of CNN. And Don says, I reiterate, retweet. Yes, that is correct. Trump retweeted it. He did not initiate that, but he has gotten like 3 times as many retweets from it as he usually gets.
Sorry about that, guys. The power flickered at my house.
We had a little bit of that going on over here earlier, actually.
Mm-hmm.
But Don, to answer your question, I don't give a lot of thoughts to Trump's tweets. I like that he tweets because it means that he is not filtered by the enemy press, by the tyrannical left, by people like Mika Brzezinski, who believes that it is her job to tell us what to think, to tell you what to think. not to deliver
Trump
the news, but to aggressively inundate you with her own brand of neurolinguistic programming. As far as the video itself that he retweeted, I mean, let's be real. It's an actual video of Donald Trump at a wrestling match beating somebody down as realistically as anybody at WWE or WWF ever actually beat somebody down.
Yeah,
And they photoshopped
really a joke.
the CNN logo as his head.
It's a funny joke too.
And it's funny.
It's clever.
It's cute and it's funny. It's a shitload funnier than.
Hey, he could have bought a bunch of blood on the CNN head.
Yeah, there's no blood on the CNN head.
And honestly, I don't think Donald Trump would tweet unless he felt like he had to. If he felt like he could get a fair shake from the press, he might be more willing to allow certain parts of his message to be controlled by them. But I mean, at this point, he's basically had the non-existent Russian investigation that's been talked about for 7 months solid now. And there's no way they didn't all know, back last January when Comey knew that, I mean, old songbird Comey there, I mean, they all knew, and they just continued to run with it and drum up all this fear and animosity. And Steve Scalise gets shot and almost dies from some burning nut job, but they're worried that, and I've watched some of the stuff with the reaction to the CNN professional wrestling video, and I mean, and there are honestly people on the Sunday shows on ABC and CNN saying things like Donald Trump is going to get a member of the press killed. That is not an exaggeration. There are people saying this. And I mean, and I guess, on a long enough timeline, the survival rate for anything is 0. So eventually maybe a crazy right-wing guy might hurt a member of the news media. But, it hasn't happened yet. There's been some leftist violence recently. But a thing that most of us on the right or in the center, or
violence like starving babies to death.
Oh yeah, a lot like that, But I mean, we see it as a joke. It's sort of like way back when in the debates when Trump had that great.
To be clear, what we see as a joke is Donald Trump, WWE beat down, breaking up CNN, not Holodomor murdering Charlie Gard. That's not funny.
Right. No, that's terrible, and will bring a gloomy cloud into any room.
Like this room, where I just totally shit all over you about to be funny.
Yeah, thanks, buddy. Thanks. I was trying to build up to a punchline, and I just lost it.
See, but I just saved it. I just gave you the levity. There you go. Here's your levity. You drop this.
Oh, thanks. I'll take that levity back now, please. No, but it even reminds me, going all the way back to when Trump made what was clearly a smart-ass remark about maybe Russia's got Hillary's emails. I mean, given everything that was going on at the time, and that she had deleted thousands of emails and not all of them had been recovered, and that her server had been hacked, Donald Trump wasn't saying somebody needs to go get the emails. Donald Trump was saying Hillary's already been hacked and somebody's got these emails. It was a clever shot at Hillary, and it was a funny joke all at the same time. And I think part of what I really just had this revelation earlier today, that I think part of what the press hates so much about Donald Trump is they created him. And I don't just mean they created him by creating an environment where a wrecking ball starts to sound like a good idea for a president, because how toxic our politics has become definitely contributed to the fact that suddenly Trump started looking like a viable candidate. But I'm also talking about the fact that the media went out of their way to make the president a pop culture figure. They have wanted their daily press briefings and their televised debates and all of these other things. And they really ascended into that role with Barack Obama. There were jokes when he first got elected that he was basically the American Idol president. Well, now we have, for lack of a better turn of a phrase, the right-wing American Idol president, somebody with his thumb on the pulse of pop culture that does understand celebrity and how you have to be bigger.
Oh, Cameron. Cameron. Well, apparently we've lost the Cameron again.
Probably global warming.
Yeah.
Happened here twice already. I'm sure it's happening everywhere else.
Yeah, it's because of global warming. You know what? It's already all right. So technical difficulties. The show's going to fall apart on technical difficulties. Let's go ahead and get to our White Hats Matter segment. Heartwarming tales of death and destruction. And this week, ladies and gentlemen, I want to start with a story that relates to the story. One of the very last things I did for old Uncle Sam before I left the Army is they asked me and a few of my battle buddies, other non-commissioned officers, to teach a class about combat convoy operations to a group of Marines in Hawaii. A group of Marines that they had all been desk guys and they were getting ready for their first deployment. Had a lot of young Marines with them, a lot of young boys. And we were teaching them how to operate a convoy in combat. So one of the first things I did is I hollered out at them to have all my drivers stand up. All my drivers stood up, and I pointed at the youngest, lowest ranked driver I could find. And I said, "You boy, what is your primary weapon system?" And he started to rattle off, "Sergeant, my primary weapon is my main battle rifle, the M4A1." Shut up. No, you are a driver in a combat convoy, boy. I cannot afford for you to take your hands off that wheel. Your primary weapon system is that 15-ton armored truck. That is your weapon. So, I say that to segue. Usually, our white hat goes out to an armed citizen who used his firearm, his or her firearm. Lindsay, I know. Love you, sweetheart. In the defense of self or others. But what we had this last week, I was not able to find a woman's name, but in North Carolina at a Walmart, a half-naked man reached into the window of a pregnant woman's SUV, was rummaging through her purse when a handful of people, a couple of guys came up, spotted him, put a stop to that shit. He takes off running with her purse, and are we ready? I'm not going to pull up the video because it's every copy of it I can find online is tagged by the Daily Caller or Fox News or People or somebody else who's going to try to hit me with a copyright infringement for running the video clip. But this pregnant woman hopped in her SUV and ran him down. Brother stole her purse, took off running with it, and she ran him down. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Now, I would be remiss if I did not point out that she is being charged with a crime. But she's being charged basically with misdemeanor assault. So, yeah, Don points out she couldn't chase him. I don't know, Don. I'd have loved to have seen her go waddling after him with a revolver.
She actually said, I thought that it's something to the effect of, I thought this would be the easiest way.
Yeah, she said this would be the easiest way to catch him.
She was correct.
Yep. So I sweetheart, you have my full support. And if anybody can get in touch with her, the Brushfire Mind would love to send her flowers and a teddy bear when she actually has the baby. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, it has been a privilege as always. Thanks for joining us this evening. We're going to go ahead and sign off. It is a quarter to 2100, and I've just about run the scope of the stories because I get heated when we start talking about governments murdering babies. It bothers me. So I pretty much run myself out on that. So until next week, remember, if you build a man a fire, you'll keep him warm for the evening. But if you set a man on fire, he'll be warm for the rest of his life. Good night.